studying the human mind is a tricky business. There's still so much we don't know and so many questions scientists are looking to answer. But when researchers are working with human subjects, they have to balance getting answers with protecting their subjects. In the past, they haven't always been good about taking care of the fellow human beings they're studying. A lot of historical psychology experiments would be considered unethical by today's standards, and the foundation of the ethical standards we use today comes from the 1970s, when scientists came up with a list of rules to protect the security and privacy of human volunteers. It's known as the Belmont Report. Basically, 3 key ethical principles to guide all human research. The first point is called respect for persons, and it means that subjects have to give informed consent. Anyone who participates in human research, including psychological research, needs to know the risks and benefits of the experiment before signing up. The second ethical principle is called beneficence, and it basically means that researchers should try not to have any negative impact on the well-being of the people who participate in their studies. Basically, do no harm. The final point, justice, involves making sure that subjects aren't exploited. Researchers should also make sure that the burdens of the study and the benefits of the results are distributed fairly. In early research studies, for example, the subjects would often be poor, while wealthier patients would benefit from the results of the experiment. And that's not okay. These rules apply to human research in all fields, including psychology. But the code of conduct hasn't always been so clearly defined, and before it was, there were a lot of questionable studies being done. In the year 1920, a psychologist named John Watson wanted to show that humans can be classically conditioned, like what happened to Pavlov's dogs. Basically, classical conditioning means pairing a stimulus, like food, that triggers a physical response, like drooling, with an unrelated stimulus, like a bell. Even though ringing a bell, of course, wouldn't normally make dogs drool, when Pavlov paired the sound with food, he conditioned the dogs to respond to the bell by drooling. Watson and his team decided to prove that this could be done in humans by classically conditioning a 9-month-old baby named Albert using animals and scary noises. First, the researchers presented Albert with a fuzzy white rat. As he'd reach out to pet the animal, the psychologists would strike a hammer against a metal bar behind his head, creating a loud noise to startle him. Eventually, just the sight of the white rat was enough to make Albert start crying and crawl away. He'd begun to associate the fear of the loud, scary noise with the fuzzy white rat. So yeah, Albert had been conditioned. But this study failed in a lot of ways. For one thing, it used a single subject and no controls, so Watson hadn't really proved anything. But then, of course, there were the ethical issues. Watson never reconditioned Albert to not be afraid anymore, so he was permanently affected by the experiment and not in a good way. We also don't know if Albert's mother fully consented to the research.